You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast produced by Veteran Strategies and featuring conversations with fascinating and impactful men and women who have shaped our world, our communities, and our history. My name is Robert Vane, Principal of Veteran Strategies, and your host for our discussion. You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, a local veteran public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Girl Scouts of Central Indiana, Garmon Construction, Leaders and Legends LLC, the Grand Hall and Conference Center at Historic Union Station, the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn, and McAllister Machinery, your friendly neighborhood Caterpillar dealer. You may find all your sales and rental equipment needs at McAllister.com. We are pleased to announce our podcast is a member of the All Indiana Podcast Network in partnership with Wish TV. You may find Leaders and Legends at allindianapodcastnetwork.com. Thinking of starting a podcast or need to host a public meeting? Let Leaders and Legends LLC be your partner as you look for new ways to communicate your message. Please contact Chris Spangle and me at leadersandlegends.net. Thank you for joining us on the Leaders and Legends podcast. Our guest today is my particular favorite, BBC. Bold, brilliant commentator.
I was going to say British Broadcasting Company.
Abdul-Hakim Shabazz, who I've known almost since you came to the market. I consider not only him to be a wonderful friend, a terrific supporter, but absolutely, without a doubt, one of the most courageous journalists in the Hoosier State. We're very, very pleased to have him on the podcast. You were one of the first people I thought of when I started Leaders and Legends, and it's just taken ridiculously long to get you on. He is going to be interrogated first by Mr. Chris Spangle, and there would be no Chris Spangle without Abdul-Hakim Shabazz.
It's true, he's my father.
Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father.
Looks like we took out the oven a little bit too early there, son.
Didn't finish gestating? Yeah.
Abdul, I love you, and I'm very happy you're on the podcast.
Hey, always good to be here. Nice to be on the receiving end for a change, supposed on the giving end.
Yeah, no kidding. I've been on your show, I don't know how many times.
8 million times.
we need Wagner here.
We do need Wagner here. We miss sweet Jennifer Wagner, who used to get in trouble when I would say things that were absolutely insane. And she would laugh, and then she would get like, hey, you're not supposed to laugh at that idiot.
Because that's where Robert and I met when I was your producer from, I was an intern from 2004 to full-time in 2007 and 2008. And that's where I met Robert. And then we met at the gym, and you said, hey, I want to start a podcast. I know you push some buttons. He didn't ask Abdul for a reference. Otherwise, we never would have started this podcast.
But you know, those were fun times to drive all the way from Perry Township to WXNT at 96th and Meridian at 7 in the morning so I could battle with the Wicked Witch of the Left. But I miss it, and I miss her, and that was a lot of fun.
Well, those were the good old days.
Yeah, it was so much fun. There's on my SoundCloud, The Ghost of WXNT. If you Google it, you'll find it, and it's all the podcasts from 7 and 8. And you can hear you two arguing. You can hear the Willie Lynch stuff.
Tell me you have election night.
I bet I do, yeah. I bet I do. I'll look.
Because I remember we sent you down to the Democrat headquarters.
Yeah. And it was grim.
2007 election.
It was grim.
I just remember, and then Chris, I'll turn it over to you and you can take it away. But I remember that the first time I ever really made Abdul laugh was when it was probably 2007. It'd have to be post 2006. When Abdul asked a question about Mitch Daniels in the General Assembly, Governor Daniels, and my reply was, if Pat Bauer says no anymore, he could have been my prom date.
I remember that.
And you got in big trouble.
I got in a little bit of... I put it this way. I was applauded for my creativity. Go ahead, Chris.
You know, I've known you since you got here in 2004 as your intern. That was my first internship, and you had started in September. I started in December, and you didn't know a lot about the town. And you've turned into the dean of Indiana journalists. verified by a court. So, we'll talk about Indianapolis, but, I've known you a long time. You were a groomsman at my wedding. And there's certain parts of your life that I don't feel like I know a lot about that I want to hear more
like the
about.
body in the trunk of the car?
You'd have to clear out the trunk to put anything in there first. While setting up, I was having flashbacks. The mic was flapping. It's like, what are you doing? This is how this works. But I want to start with your parents. Your parents have both passed. Mm-hmm. They were lovely, wonderful people. I just want to hear about how you grew up. You have great brothers. You have a great family. Some of them are here. But just talk about your parents and where you grew up and what they instilled in you.
Well, I was the oldest male child. So that, like they say, the order that you're born, kind of has some bearing on your personality and how you're raised in the whole 9 yards. Both my parents were previously married. My dad had 5 daughters. My mom had 2 daughters. Then they got together and had 5 sons. So people would ask, are you guys either good Catholics or oversexed Protestants?
Or there was no cable.
No, there's no cable back in the early 80s either. So
not much to do.
You guys on a television or something? But luckily, my sisters all live with their other custodial parents. So my dad still lives with their mom. My sisters live with their father. Otherwise, you have like 12 children in a house and basically 1.5 bathrooms, which is not good for.
No, I saw this movie with the, what is it, Cheaper by the Dozen?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, his, hers, and ours, so to speak. Yeah. So I was the oldest male. So my job was basically to make sure everybody's homework was done, make sure the house was clean, because both my parents worked. So I'm kind of in charge and running the show. So I couldn't go out and get in trouble like my younger brothers did. I saved all my stuff for college,
right?
Which is what you're supposed to do in the first place. I grew up on the south side of Chicago in the late 70s, early 80s. We lived from 1972 to 1986. Then we moved to Europe and Germany for a while. But went to college preparatory high school. So we had to take a test to get in. So I was smart and a genius back then.
Right.
Back then, too. I actually started school at 3 years old, believe it or not.
Really?
Yes.
I wouldn't know that, but I figured you'd tell me.
Exactly. Yeah, so no, sharp kid. My growing up was basically middle class, black growing up. I mean, my parents were Islamic, so we didn't necessarily eat pork or bacon. I kind of, threw a monkey wrench in the show around Christmas time.
Happy Ramadan, by the way.
Right, thank you. Still doing that.
Yeah.
No alcohol for 15 days, so... Started April 1st, done May 1st, so down 7 pounds.
You don't do Ramadan like you do it like Lent Ramadan. You don't do it.
I do the Abdul version of Ramadan.
Right, not the like. I grew up with Muslim classmates, and they couldn't eat from sunup to sundown. And then I met you, and you're like, well, I just don't drink alcohol.
Yeah, just give alcohol for 30 days.
So, like, is your faith like important to you? Like, how did it inform you the Muslim tradition?
I'm not really practicing. I mean, do I believe in God?
No.
Yes. Am I living proof of His genius? Yes.
Every time there's thunder, you run to the window.
Go take a bow. Yeah, exactly. Hey, you still got the jokes.
I've got the liners.
You're going to hear that liner again in a couple of weeks, by the way. So, I mean, I'm not a fanatic about it because I don't believe in, blowing up school buses or...
Good.
Or women have to wear burqas, that sort of thing.
Right.
So, I take religion in a stride. It's like, okay, God just wants you to be nice and say please and thank you. And don't be a jerk.
Right. So how did you end up in Germany? Was your dad in the military?
My dad was in the military when we were younger. Then he got out, and then he went back in as a civilian because he rejoined back in 84.
Right.
Then he had an assignment to go to either Europe or California. And he and my mom were like, no, let's take the boys to Europe. They're getting exposure, different part of the world, different part of the country, and it's all on the government dime. So
yeah,
I spent my first couple years of college and actually in Munich, Germany.
Okay. Did you cause any trouble in Munich? Invade any beer halls? Try any pushs?
Actually, Munich is where I went to television for the first time.
Really?
Because when I was in high school, I was a computer science engineering major because that's what I wanted to do. And then when I was sitting in Calculus 2 class, and the teachers write a lecture on the board, I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I'm bored out of my friggin' mind. So I remember calling my dad like, hey, Dad, I can't do this anymore. It's like, well, son, it's okay to change your major, but remember, you got 4 younger brothers, and we got a timetable.
Yeah.
So whatever you're gonna do it and get out the way and get it done. So I went down to what was called MCTV, Munich Campus Television, which is like the old video camcorder with the VHS tape and the edit bays and the whole 9 yards. And so I'm watching their show, and it was like Saturday Night Live. I was like, this is stupid. This is crap. And my buddy, who was the executive producer at the time, like, think you could do better? I could do better asleep. Like, hey, well, come by tomorrow and audition. Like, okay, fine. So I came by the next day and auditioned. So they gave me a script to read. And looked at it, I was like, this is stupid. No wonder nobody goes, this is crap. Like, do you think you can do better? Yeah. So I wrote 5 minutes worth of stuff, and then after I read it, they're like, so you want your own show or what? So they gave me my own show. It was called Up Abdul's Alley. it was like an Andy Rooney type commentary thing of 5 minutes of me talking about the scandals that were going on at the University of Maryland's Munich campus.
Really? Okay, so you were an investigative reporter in your college days too.
I was more of a muckraker than an investigative reporter.
Yeah, so you've been doing the same thing, kind of the same shtick, like
for almost 40 years.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, it's working for you. Yeah.
Hey, checks still keep coming in.
Yeah.
It's paying for Alaska in June.
Nice. So, what did you learn in Germany and living overseas? What kind of lessons did you take away from that?
Well, it was interesting growing up in an all middle class black neighborhood. Just basically one set of people to go overseas, and it's like basically everybody. White, black, Hispanic, Asian, you name it. And for me, I enjoyed it. I loved it. I didn't want to come back.
Yeah.
When I was there because I enjoyed being around different people. Different politics, different attitudes, just different everything.
Yeah.
Which was what made Germany so much fun. Now, when I came back to America, I did kiss the ground.
Why?
Because I was like happy to be back in America. Because the first thing I did was go into a 7-Eleven and the guy didn't speak English. So I was like, thank you, God, I'm home.
As opposed to German?
This is wonderful. Well, no, because Germany, things closed down. You didn't have the 24-hour whatever. And so when we came back to America, it was like 24-hour grocery store, cable, television on 24 hours a day. It's like, oh my God, I'm back home.
Yeah.
Even though I still miss Europe from time to time.
Cosmopolitan, we might call it.
Yes. Not the magazine.
No. So let's talk about your dad. I mean, just tell us a little bit about your dad and what are one or two things that you take away from him that you learned the most from?
The one thing I learned from my father was, son, don't be afraid to talk to people. Particularly whenever I would get like a job opportunity, the first one I always call was my dad. Like, hey, Dad, these folks call blah, blah, blah. He's like, son, you got nothing to lose from sitting down and talking to people. And so that I always did. So whether it was WXNT, WJBC Radio in Bloomington, WMBD Television in Peoria, or St. Louis University Law School, my dad always said, son, don't be afraid to talk to people. And at least hear them out and hear what they have to say.
Yeah.
And the other thing my dad always told me was, son, never let your arrogance exceed your intelligence.
Well, how do you think you're doing at that?
I think I'm doing pretty darn good.
I bet you do.
I'm told I'm condescending. That means I talk down to people from time to time.
I was your intern, and I know. So what about your mom? I mean, tell us a little bit about her and what you learned from her.
The one thing I learned from my mom, which I'll never forget, is that God never puts more pressure on you than you can handle. And so that became abundantly clear when I took the bar exam. Because I think I may have told you the story like a long time ago, but for the audience that doesn't know, I'm also a lawyer, believe it or not, so please forgive me. Went to law school part-time at St. Louis University, so it was basically a 100-mile-an-hour drive one way from Springfield to St. Louis for like 3-4 nights a week for 3.5 years, but I got my law degree, all that taken care of. And so when I took the bar exam, I took it in Chicago. So it was a 2-day test, 6 hours, both days. One day was all essay, the day was all multiple choice. And so I remember coming home, so my dad so son, how'd you do? It's like, well, I could have passed, I could have failed. Because you have no idea how you did. And so the day the bar exam results came out, I got on my computer at work at the Attorney General's office, like, okay, let's see where my number is. Because the way they did back then, they gave you a 4-digit number. If you saw your 4-digit number on the screen, you passed. If you didn't see the 4-digit number, we'll see you to take the test the next go around.
Yeah.
So I was looking for my number. Like, it's funny, I don't see my number here. So I hit refresh. And I didn't see my number. So I hit Control-Alt-Delete.
I couldn't have failed.
And I didn't see the number. So I turned my computer off, unplugged it, plugged it back in, and turned it back on. Like, where blank is my number here? I don't see it. Like, holy crap, I didn't pass the bar exam. I'm like, wow. So I was just in shock because I knew it was a possibility, but it's like, okay, no more pressure than you can handle. Got your law degree, got your master's degree, you got a job. So it's not like you're counting on some lawyer job somewhere to get ahead. You're still fine. And then about 3 weeks later, saw a story in the Chicago Tribune that said there was a mistake on the multi-state portion of the bar exam. Well, no, I'm getting ahead of myself. When you pass the bar exam, they just send you a letter saying you passed.
Right.
When you fail the bar exam, they send you like a packet. And they told me I missed the bar exam by like 5 points. Now in Illinois, if you miss by 4 points or less, you get an automatic regrade because that's within 1% of a 400 point scale. And I needed 265 to pass, which is like 63%. So I had 259. So I missed it literally by 5 points. But now fast forward, 3 weeks later, they say, hey, there's a mistake on the multi-state part. And the question that we told people they got wrong, they actually got right. And so now everybody's starting to freak out because you got people who've been sworn in, who started jobs, who aren't really lawyers anymore, Other people missed it by a point. It was just a mess. It was about to be a disaster nationwide. So the first thing I was going to do is go find a lawyer and go sue until I got the results that I wanted. I was going to go down to St. Clair County, which is just on the east side of St. Louis, which is a very plaintiff-friendly county. It's the most plaintiff-friendly county in the whole state of Illinois.
Always looking for the loophole.
Exactly. And so I was like, hey, I'm going to go find me a St. Clair County lawyer. I'm going to sue till I get my results, damn it, because I bust my ass for this damn thing. It's $65,000 worth of student loan.
Yeah.
But my lawyer friends at the AG's office were like, Abdul, you shouldn't fight it. Just the horrible way to start your career. Just take it and go level. Like, well, no, I'm not. So I wrote him a letter like, hey, I don't trust you guys. I want my whole exam regraded because it's like mice or potato chips. There's never just one. There's probably more and more and more. And so they emailed me back saying, Mr. Shabazz, we got your response, whatever. Okay, fine. They're going to tell me go pound sand or go engage in self-copulation and then go get the lawyer and file a lawsuit. So it turns out that day in May, I got a phone call. Like, hi, Abdul, this is Mary from the Illinois Board of Bar Examiners. Hi, Mary, it's Abdul. How you doing? Like, doing fine. Like, they're about to tell me, hey, we're not going to do anything for you. You're screwed. It's like, well, I'll let you know that we regraded your exam. Yeah. And you passed. I was like, you're shitting me. I was like, oops, I'm sorry to curse in your ear. I'm like,
No, you're fine.
My bad. No, I sort of told her on the phone.
Oh.
This podcast, say whatever I want. I was like, you're kidding me. It's like, nope, you can call me back in 20 minutes. It'll be the same thing. And by the way, left your message at home on your answer machine too. I was like, holy crap. So what happened was, because I missed it by 5 points, the question that everybody said that was marked wrong, I got it right, which means I missed by 4 points, which kicked in the automatic regrade. So here I am. If I'm going to use a sports analogy, which I probably shouldn't, I'm on my 1 yard line. The sun's in my face. And I throw the Hail Mary the wrong way. And the guy runs it all the way back to win by like 1 point. Literally, that's what happened. So the first thing I did was I called my parents. Like, hey, Mom, Dad, guess what? I passed the bar exam, blah, blah, blah. My mother's like, I knew they could keep my baby down, blah, blah. I was like, okay, all right. Calm down. It's okay, Mom. And then I went downstairs and got on the office intercom system. Like, excuse me, everyone. It's Abdul. Because we had like a big open foyer, like just like in the Emmis building, but so people can actually come out on the balconies and see what's going on. Like, just want everybody know in this building that I passed the bar exam. They messed up. They made the mistake. Thank you very much. I'm taking the rest of the day off.
Well, we're in your childhood. Where do you think that confidence or arrogance or whatever, where does it come from? Is it an act? Is it a choice? Where does the swagger come from?
From hard work.
Yeah.
I can talk crap because I work my butt off.
Yeah.
That's why when I came to Indianapolis, I started going to every meeting humanly possible, because that's how you're going to learn what the issues are, who the newsmakers are, who are people you can talk to, who you can trust. That's why, like I said, the first week of the legislature, I was there like till literally every day.
Yeah.
And so if you work hard, I always wouldn't firmly believe you can't talk smack unless you can back it up.
Yeah.
And I can back it up. And by the way, I called my best friend from law school and told her what happened. She was like, Abdul, this is why you shouldn't be so damn arrogant all the time. Maybe this will teach you some humility. I was like, bullshit. I was right the first time, and they were wrong. She just scratched her head and just hung up the phone. Like, call me later. Like, okay, we'll do.
That's funny. So you go to college. I mean, what did you want to do when you grew up? And then what did you go to college for? I know you got a lot of different degrees. I mean,
actually, I wanted to be a teacher,
really?
Believe it or not.
Okay.
I wanted to be a math and science teacher because I had really good teachers in high school and elementary school. But then I changed gears and went to television and radio and did that junior, senior year. And then I became a reporter at WJBC Radio in Bloomington, Illinois, just 140 miles, literally up I-74. Did that for a couple years. Then I went to graduate school, got my master's in government. Then went for a radio station in Springfield, being the political reporter. Then after doing that for a couple years, went to work for the Illinois Attorney General. Then I went to law school. Then my boss ran for governor. He got fired. He lost, so we all got fired. Lost to Rod Blagojevich, which I think you were there.
Yes, I was there then. And you did not like to talk about Mr. Ryan.
No.
You did not like me to bring it up.
No, that was a sore spot. Then I just remember, because I think you were still producing the morning show at the time.
Yeah.
And I had an interview with one of the Fox News reporters. It was something in Chicago. It was like, what was it? It was like some workers that barricaded themselves in some union building or whatever, won more money or whatever. She was like, yeah, Abdul, no, the mayor's here, or the governor's here. It's like, Rod Blagojevich is there? Like, has he been arrested yet? Like, you do realize he is going to jail eventually. That kind of caught her off guard. Like, I'm sorry about that, kid. I didn't mean to do that. Just kind of caught me off guard. Then the next thing, the cops show up. Hey, get your clothes on. We're coming to get you. And I knew Rob Blagojevich was going to go to prison because when I went back to being a reporter, we're in the governor's media veil, like, Daniels and Holcomb and all those guys have one, where they kind of, say their thing and then they open up the floor for questions. Like, Governor, question for you. State workers are filing a lawsuit against you because they feel they were fired improperly because, administrations change, but some state workers are protected.
Yeah.
Like, they're protected state workers. So how did you fire them? Because they filed a lawsuit and I think they got a case. And Blagojevich's response was, well, Abdul, if you don't think I'm a little thing like the law get in the way of me reforming this government, then someone's got another thing coming. I was like, oh my God, you're going to prison.
Yeah, you came to Indianapolis fully formed in 2004, and you were an odd choice for a conservative talk station, and still are. And I say that because, the typical, especially in 2004, it was Glenn Beck had just started, Sean Hannity had just started, you had Neil Bortz, you had Rush, obviously, and it was more propaganda. Like, here's how the left is screwing things up. But you take such a different tact, and it's something that's caused me agita because I was got my start with you. The libertarians are like, well, we just should have no government. I'm like, it's not that simple. And they're like, he's a witch, and and you're like, one day you will understand. And I just had Andy Horning on my podcast, and he's like, you get it now? I was like, yes. But when you showed up in Indianapolis, I mean, what was the percentage of working in government, working at the attorney general's level, working as a lawyer, being a lawyer, working as a journalist that kind of gives you this different view on how talk radio ought to be done?
Well, I always approach talk radio differently because, in my opinion, anybody can say the word liberal. Like, see those darn liberals, blah, blah, like, oh my God, like, I have to hear this like 8 million times a day because it was just conservative talk radio and Air America just, went off the air. And so I was like, I'm not going to do talk radio that way. I'm going to, number one, you can listen to the national stuff all day long. Like I said, Neil Bortz, Glenn Beck, Sean Hannity, to a lesser degree, Tom Likas and all the rest of those guys. It was all conservative radio all the time. Like, okay, what do we do differently that those guys aren't doing? And what are we doing differently that IBC, which was our competition at the time, isn't doing either? I mean, they had, the morning news, but it was basically a news wheel.
They had 7 minutes of actual content, and we tuned in one day, and, like, Pidge was talking about knitting. And so if you're a hardcore, you had 32 minutes, so what are you going to fill that with?
Yeah. And one day, Jeff and I, we ran into each other at Nikki Blaine's. We're having cocktails, just kind of getting to know each other. And Jeff was like, Abdul, I really like what you do. I was like, what do you mean? Because you're like a taxi driver. Every day there's a different route, different road, different stops. Me, I'm like a bus driver. Same route, same stops, all the friggin' time.
Which, unfortunately for you, is the key to success in radio and on-air radio, in that you've got to have those kind of stop signs. But with the advent of podcasting and blogging and new media, I think that's where you kind of excelled early on. And being your producer, I'm now the digital director for the Bob and Tom Show, but everything I learned was like trying to video cast Abdul in 2005, when there was no video cast, like trying all these different things because...
That camera that was in the corner?
Yeah. WXNT had no budget, had no attention paid to it whatsoever. And were you there 8 years?
From 2004 to 2011.
Yeah, I mean... You had to do different things to kind of stand out from the crowd because you weren't going to get a lot of support from the overlords.
And one of the things that we did that nobody else has really done until podcasting came along was we actually brought the voice of newsmakers on the air. Like, I play a 5-minute discussion with Bart Peterson or a 10-minute discussion with Mitch Daniels or Brian Bosma, because you can hear all the newsmakers in their entirety, and then we can talk about what they said as opposed to like a 15-second clip here and there, which takes them out of context. That's the one thing I would never do. Is take anybody out of context. This is what they said, plain and simple. Now we can argue about what they meant, but we'll not take them out of context.
Now, how much of that was ingenuity and how much of that was just raw laziness, Abdul? You're like, I was out late, I'm soaking in martinis. Just play the whole clip.
Well, my laziness is the motivation for my efficiency.
Please explain that for the court.
Well, in a nutshell... Yes, I'm fundamentally lazy, but I'm also very efficient.
Right.
Which is why I can afford to be lazy.
Yeah.
Because I'm efficient.
Yeah.
Because I'm lazy. It's 6 in one hand.
It's a beautiful system, Robert.
but also what I used to do, a lot of that I started doing when I was doing talk radio in Springfield.
Yeah.
Actually bring back the voices of, news people. And also when you're on the air from 6 to 9 or 5 to 10, that first hour, there's nobody up and paying attention. Like, hey, let's just play some of our.
You were so salty when they made you do the 5 o'clock hour. You just read the Wall Street Journal every morning.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. No, I think that innovation was really interesting because it was the first time I'd ever seen anybody do talk radio like that. And it endeared you to so many of the politicos in town, to the people who wanted to actually know what was going on. And it built you like a core audience of people that built a lot of credibility with people early on.
Yeah, because my thing was, we are not WIBC, we're not the Annapolis Star, so why should we try to be? Because we don't have the audience, we don't have the resources to do what they do, even though at the end of the day, if you look at, just so how the market's changed, the Star isn't what it used to be, IBC isn't what it used to be. They're actually what XNT was when we first started back in 2004. But one thing I would do back in Springfield is I would actually bring the voice of newsmakers and actually put them on the air so people can hear what the mayor had to say, what the council had to say, what the governor had to say. Like, don't take my word for it. I don't want you to think what I think. I want you to make up your own mind.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I think, but we're going to play the whole interview first.
So I know Andrew Lee hired you. He hired me. Poor choices up and down the dial, all over to, wherever he's at now. But how did you end up in Indianapolis, and what made you? Did you want to move to Indiana?
By sheer accident. This is our second tour of duty here.
Did your license plate say Indiana or Illinois? We'll get to that because I want to hear about.
Actually, on the new car, it is Indiana plates.
But how did you decide to come to Indianapolis? How did you get the job here at XNT?
It was kind of a weird circle. My boss at the radio station I was at in Springfield, WMAY, went to a radio station in Florida where our old boss Andrew Lee used to work.
Yeah.
And Andrew Lee came up here to WXNT in Indianapolis. And so they were looking for a morning show host. And so Andrew asked my old boss, TJ Hart, like, hey, do you know anybody who might be interested in doing a talk radio here in Indianapolis? Like, well, I got a guy back in Springfield who might be what you want. And so Andrew called me like, hi, Abdul, this is Andrew Lee from WXNT Radio in Indianapolis. Like, XNT, what the hell is XNT? I have no idea what that is. Let me go to the internet. Oh, my God, this is a crappy website. What? Hi, Andrew. What can I do for you? It's like, well, we're looking for a morning show host. Heard some good things about you. He'd send us a couple audition tapes. Let's send him a couple audition tapes, and it came down to me and a guy from Detroit who was tired of the Detroit rat race, was looking to kind of slow down a bit. And so I ended up getting the job, and it was kind of funny because I was dating somebody at the time, like, hey, I'm going to go over to Indianapolis, do this for a couple years, go back, and then go become prosecutor, county prosecutor, then governor, then president. I have my own.
Is that why you kept the residence in Illinois?
In part, yeah.
Okay, what's the other parts? I want to hear all of it. No more evasion. I've had 15 years of evasion out of you on this.
Part of the reason why I kept it was I wasn't planning to stay here for long.
Right.
It just, then I met the lovely Mrs. Shabazz. That kind of changed everything.
Yeah.
Well, I was like, if I'm going to be here for a couple of years, why go all the grief and hassle of change everything? I'm just going to go back in a couple of years. But the girl I was dating, about a year here, we broke up. So it's like, okay, well, I'll just keep the house in Illinois for a while. Then we'll just do that till we finally decide to do what we're going to do. And then when I got my new car, I was like, let's just go ahead and do it.
So you finally relented.
Yeah.
You're now a Hoosier.
I'm an adopted Hoosier.
See, you'll never claim it. So you
got to remember, for most of my life, Hoosier is not a term of endearment.
Right. No, I know. Yeah. It isn't even too much here. But let's get into the glory years of WXNT. Starting around 2006, 2007, you have a tumultuous period with Bart Peterson. You have a lot of crime. The crime was spiking a lot then. You had the charter school wars. You had daylight savings time. You had
IPS
and Eugene White. You had, just the building of the stadium and Lucas Oil Stadium. And then you had the victory of Mayor Ballard. And no matter what anybody listening to this program wants to think, I was there. Greg Ballard had you and 2 staffers until the last 2 weeks of that campaign. And to this day, he's incredibly friendly to me, which is really sweet of him.
Well, actually, here's a little secret I never told anybody, but I'm going to tell you on this program today. I was never on the mayor's payroll, so that's
right.
So none of that. But the mayor's campaign manager and his campaign assistant, they were in my apartment, which literally used to be down the street from where we are recording the podcast today. And they were like, if we need a slogan or something, I was like, easy, had enough.
Yeah.
Had enough of high crime, had enough of high taxes, had enough of this, had enough of that. And then they took it and ran with it. And then the art signs started popping up, had enough.
Yeah.
So I had enough.
I won't mention her name. But
no, she had nothing to do with it.
I know. But those years were incredibly fun to do talk radio. I mean, what is it like when you've got all these local issues and the world kind of cares about? They don't necessarily care about local issues. How did you try to cover this stuff to get people into?
Easy. I just told people, hey, this is why I cover local government. Number one, you hear the national stuff all day long, from 9 o'clock in the morning until midnight. You can hear all the national issues here on WXNT. There was nobody talking about local stuff. And I've always been a firm believer that local government is the government that can reach to your pocket the fastest because it's the government that's closest to you.
Yeah.
Because where does half your property tax budget go? It goes to schools, police, fire, roads, sewer. And so I made sure our niche was to cover the local stuff. Then the national stuff we do every once in a while with a Fox News contributor or a guest, that sort of thing. But for the most part, we just kept it local.
Yeah. I mean, is there that level of things happening on the local level, or was I just so much more aware of it back then because I was your producer? There's
so much stuff going on the local level. Like, for example, we got Marion County Democrats fighting each other.
Ooh.
Kay Sweeney Bell, who's running for county clerk right now, is in a contest with Billy Breaux, a former senator. And Senator Kay Sweeney Bell's white, Billy Breaux's black, and then there's a racial element to it. Because a lot of the black Marion County Democrats are mad at the white Democrats because the white Democrats wouldn't allow some blacks to run for, public office.
Yeah.
So we got that whole fight and battle going on back and forth. In Senate District 46 right now, which is what you're in, the slated candidate, Kristen Jones, may have actually been breaking the law because she was a campaign treasurer for a couple campaigns. And the law says you can't be a treasurer if you're a candidate.
Yeah, so how do you, I mean, you had such a great home base with that morning show, and obviously you're still on WIBC, and you've got indiepolitics.org. Let's talk about the politicians, right? Because you get along with everybody. But do you see a big difference between this generation of politics? It's like somebody hit the accelerator in 2007 and never let up. Like, you came up fighting with the Tony Duncans and the, a lot of who's the Monroe Gray, some of those guys, a lot of them have moved on and have retired.
Actually, Monroe Gray thinks I'm a hero now.
Really?
Yep.
The longer you stick around, but I mean, why is that? What evolution of politicians have you seen in terms of local government?
They're not as, when I look at the council as a whole, when I look at the people who would used to do the budget, like Jackie Needis, Mayor Moriarty Adams, Brian Vaughn, a couple other people, there was a really good, sharp brain trust of people who could put a budget together, who could understand a budget, wouldn't let the mayor necessarily snowball them. Now, that just isn't there anymore because, like I said, Mary passed away, Jackie Needis left, Joanne Sanders left, and so that brain trust, which, by the way, I thought were all women, which I thought was also interesting.
Yeah.
That would put the budget together. On the Democratic side, they're just not there anymore. And I think the Democrats, at least here in Marion County, have kind of lost their farm team, so to speak, because usually, somebody would run for trustee or township board, and you kind of groom them to take over the positions that they would do later on. But I would say the one thing that I would never forget was Stephen Clay, who became council president through a coup with council Republicans. And I tried to kind of warn my Republican friends, what are you doing getting behind Stephen Clay? It was like, we have problems with Maggie. Like, you do realize that Stephen Clay has some issues. Some big issues, don't you? But they're like, no, it was just an accusation. Oh, my. Okay.
When you know so much and they don't listen to you, like, how do you react to that kind of stuff?
I told you so.
Right.
That sounds like I was right. Yep, I know.
So I'm gonna turn it over to Robert to ask about the 2007 campaign, because I think that was kind of where I remember being an intern. I was like, you got to go to this hobnob. You're like, what's that? And very quickly you kind of came up to speed. But by the time you hit 2007, you really kind of came into your own as a local reporter, a local journalist, and a voice to listen to. And I think Robert might know some of the ins and outs of that better than I. But talk about Greg Ballard and
I'll never forget.
What did you think was going to happen in that campaign?
Well, Greg Ballard and I met each other when we would do like this New Century Publishing like book show thing. Dave Caswell was the guy's name. And he would do a show on Saturdays on WXNT, and Greg Ballard was one of the people whose books he published about small unit leadership. And because Greg was a retired Marine, I was a military brat, we developed a friendship, through that. And then one day, Greg called me up. He's like, hey, Abdul, are you free for lunch today? So I'm not free for lunch today, but I can meet you after the show tomorrow. It's like, what's up? Like, well, I'll tell you tomorrow. I'll meet you at Panera Bread on 86 and Michigan Road. And so we met on 86 and Michigan Road. So Greg, what's up? It's like, well, I'm thinking about running for mayor. I was like, of what? Indianapolis. Indiana? Like, yeah. Against Bart Peterson? Yeah. Bart Peterson with $3 million in the bank, and although a 65%, albeit soft approval rating, Bart Peterson? Yeah, I'm thinking about running for mayor. What do you think? It's like, well, it's not impossible. And back then the issue was crime. We hadn't hit the property tax disaster yet. So crime was a big issue. I was like, well, Mr. Mayor, let me tell you, ever see Star Wars? Yeah. Well, you know that closing scene when Luke Skywalker's kind of flying down the Death Star Canyon? Yeah, and Darth Vader and the 2 TIE fighters are behind him? Yeah. And Han Solo comes along and kind of hits one of the TIE fighters and they kind of spin out of control? Yeah. Well, you're Luke Skywalker, and Han Solo took the money and left to go pay Jabba the Hutt. So you got one shot, and you can't screw this up. But you know what? The Force was with him twice.
Yeah. I mean, the things that kind of had to go Greg Ballard's way in that campaign was amazing. Like when he gave his budget. I mean, Bart Peterson, I don't want to claim it was arrogance, maybe confidence.
Budget with blank pages in it?
A budget with blank pages. He had raised the COET tax, hiking taxes 65% in the middle of the worst. Well, we got to do it for crime, and people understand if we just explain it right. And then I've never seen anything like that city council meeting where he presented that budget. And Ballard spoke at the end, but they had to lock people out of that thing. Yep. I mean, what was it, just the property tax capital protest of 500 people.
It was a public safety tax, and the council wanted to raise it. Peterson wanted to raise it 65%. The Republicans would have given him 45% because that would have covered the pension costs, because that's what the big problem was. But but Peterson wanted to raise it 65% because they wanted to use some of the public safety tax money for crime prevention grant money. Yeah. To walk around and give to organizations like, hey, look, we're doing our part for to fight crime in Indianapolis. What I thought was interesting though, and all that was, and he does not get enough credit, even though he really does, is my good friend Tom John, because Tom was county chairman at the time, and Tom had his strategy was, it's like, okay, if I can get the council, if I get a Republican council, I can get a Republican mayor. And so what Tom did was he did not run candidates in Center Township.
Yeah.
Because if people think Peterson's going to win and your councilperson doesn't have an opponent, why go out and vote? And so on election night, Center Township closed out relatively early because at first Peterson was ahead, and then Ballard was ahead, then Peterson, then Ballard was ahead. But then I was like, okay, Center Township is going to come in, that's going to change everything. But then I was like, wait a second. And we're looking at the council races, and the precincts were closing up. I was like, holy crap, this might actually change, because Center Township was closed and done, and Peterson was still ahead, and you had the South Side townships. It's like, oh my God, I think Ballard may have actually won.
Was it election night before you really had an inkling that he was going to win?
Yes, because I still figured he had a shot, but I still figured at the end of the day, Peterson's going to pull it off.
Even with that level of civic engagement and anger.
Yes. But the Peterson people, but the African American vote that Peterson would count on to deliver him from Republicans didn't come through. And so that's what I was expecting Peterson to have just enough to pull him through, but it didn't happen. And so I was like, holy crap, we got a new mayor.
Yeah. It was this, before we go into the Ballard administration with Robert here, the Indy Undercover stuff, was this before or after Ballard got elected?
It was before Ballard got elected, but it happened and it stayed him for a couple months after he got elected.
Can you just briefly explain what that was? Because that was a bright and shining moment of you almost getting arrested.
Indy Undercover was a weblog, basically supported law enforcement, public safety. It was invented during the public safety crisis of 2006, 2007. Not to be confused with the public safety crisis of 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022. Yeah, exactly. And it was just people would send Indiegover stuff like, hey, this is going on here, and Indiegover would write about it, and it would just, the blog post would just, the traffic would just go through the roof. Now, Indiegover almost got arrested because they published the name of a police informant that the cops wanted to charge with criminal recklessness. And that was a big issue because they tracked it to my computer, which I helped Indy Undercover even though I wasn't Indy Undercover.
Would you like to go under oath under that?
Sure.
All right. You were not Joe Friday.
No.
Okay.
Not by myself, at least. And by the way, there was a Joe Friday billboard on Kentucky Avenue.
That's right. I forgot. Yeah.
Somebody put a Joe Friday billboard on Kentucky Avenue. I was like, holy crap, wow, this is like a big thing.
Was that the first time you were threatened with arrest for being a journalist?
Yes.
Okay.
That was the first time. And then it all kind of went by the wayside. So I wrote on my web blog, Indiana Bears at the time, hey, the cops were just at my door. They're about to try to arrest me. And so then once out in the open, you can't really do it anymore. But I was really hoping to go before the grand jury and just like come out and do like my Hillary Clinton when she went before the grand jury. Like, we had tea and crumpets. They were very nice people.
Yeah. Why do you think that you don't get the credit you deserve as a journalist? What is it about you that the Indiana Press Corps or Attorney General?
Because I can do whatever I want.
Okay. Why? What makes you different than them?
Because I can do whatever I want. I'm my own boss. Mm-hmm. And they have editors and publishers they have to answer to, and I don't. And I can also take stories and write about them in the cheat sheet because we'll all hear the same rumors and same gossip and innuendo, except my establishment friends in the press corps can't really do anything with it because they don't have confirmation. Meanwhile, I can write about it, call it gossip and rumor, and pay for vacations.
All right, Robert?
You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, a local veteran public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Girl Scouts of Central Indiana, Garmong Construction, Leaders and Legends LLC, the Grand Hall and Conference Center at Historic Union Station, the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn, and McAllister Machinery, your friendly neighborhood Caterpillar dealer. Our guest on the Leaders and Legends podcast is Abdul-Hakim Shabazz. Guest host you've just heard is Mr. Chris Spangle, engineer for the podcast, and quite frankly, without him, there would be no Leaders and Legends podcast. So, Chris, I'm very grateful to you, as always. Abdul, is there a particular Hoosier leader or legend you admire most?
Yes. At the state level, it's Mitch Daniels. Because Mitch Daniels also kind of came into politics at the same time, so to speak, because he got elected in 2004. That's when I kind of started in 2004. So we both kind of got our start about the same time. And what I liked about Mitch Daniels was his straightforwardness. He was like, hey, you know what? And when Daniels did his first State of the State address, I knew he was smarter. He knew he was the smartest guy in the room because he wanted to cut the size and scope of government. But he knew that there's no way the legislature is going to do it because that's all their friends and buddies that have come to the ranks. And so what did Daniels do? He said, you know what? I'm going to ask for a 1 penny income tax surcharge for those making over $100,000 a year to help get our budget under control. And he knew there's no way lawmakers would have gone for that. So what they had to do, they had to cut the budget instead. Like that, my friend, that's somebody playing three-dimensional chess when the other guy's playing Connect 4.
Yeah.
And so just that, and sort of just like I said, whether it was a toll road, whether it was like, kind of reforming, state government. Now, did Daniels have some failures? Yeah, like the lottery he wanted to privatize. That didn't happen. He wanted to do the commerce connector, like the second ring of 465. That didn't necessarily work. But over 8 years, I thought Indiana was in a much better place afterwards, after Daniels left, than when he came in office.
He's so often talked about on this podcast he's always that answer to that question. What is it about Mitch Daniels that makes him a change agent where he can go into a higher institution, conservatives say, oh, institutions are dead, let's create our own, where he goes in and reforms it, or comes into Indiana government and says, we're going to take you on. Like, what is it about his personality that you saw that makes him that change agent?
Well, I think in a nutshell, there are two types of people in Indiana, and it's a different mindset. There are people who live here but have lived somewhere else and came back, and people who have lived here and never left. And there's a different mindset than the people who've gone away for a while versus people who've been here all their entire lives and never have gone anywhere. If you're not from here or you live somewhere else, you bring a different perspective, to Indiana. Or I suppose if you live here, I don't see what the problem is. Why do we need to change our clocks? Our clocks are just fine.
When it comes to the people you've covered in your study, because I know you like history and political history a lot as well, has anyone more outperformed expectations than Greg Ballard in his 8 years as mayor?
I would say no, because Greg Ballard was not he was not a politician. He was just a regular guy who said, guess what? I had enough.
Yeah.
and decided to go ahead and run for mayor and won. Now, granted, it was basically a whole bunch of ducks in a row and striking at the right place at the right time, because you guys know as well about politics is also timing.
Yeah.
More than anything else. And so I got to give Greg Ballard credit, because Greg Ballard was smart enough to know what he did know, but he brought in really sharp, smart people, like Chris Cotterill, like, Ryan Vaughn, like Jason Dudich, like Paul Okus and his chiefs of staff to basically run the show. And he got people like, Dave
Sherman.
Yeah. To take care of, DPW, because the roads were, crappy. And so people like that, Ballard brought in to make the city run, because that's all people want to do is I want the city to run on time. Brought in like Troy Riggs as public safety director. And I know people didn't like him, but I was kind of liked Frank Straub, because hey, we're going to professionalize, our police force.
Yeah.
But then again, I didn't have the same relationship with Straub as you did.
Well, because Straub didn't lie to you repeatedly. Imagine that. So when you're covering someone, how hard is it to put aside how much you may agree with them?
Actually, it's very easy to do, because even though there are people in politics who I like, people who I can't stand, you still have to be a professional and just ask a straightforward question. Like, Governor Daniels, what about blah, 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 blah. Mayor Ballard, what about X, Y, Z? Even though I like you personally, we still got a job to do.
Yeah.
And one thing I've always been a firm believer in doing, and I learned this back in Illinois, was developing personal relationships with elected officials.
Yeah.
Because you need to talk to them when the bad things happen. Also, you need to talk to them when the good things happen. Like Tony Bennett was a really good friend. He just lost his daughter recently, which was like an awful murder. Called up him and his wife, like, hey, guys, we're so sorry to hear everything. Anything you need from us, just let us know. But we developed that friendship over time and over the years. And like I said, even like some of the council Democrats who, say, 10 years ago, wouldn't necessarily get along, but I said in politics, no permanent friends or permanent enemies, just permanent interests.
Yeah. Well, there's something about, and I've seen it with Robert and kind of, doing this podcast, and I have it with some of my old college Republican friends when I was the head of the Libertarian Party, it's like, Mark Warner. Now you sort of like have respect for each other because you know what they went through, they know what you went through. Like
you grew up,
and the older you get, you sort of recognize other guys' scars and go, you put yourself in their shoes a little bit. I'm sure that when you first got here, it was a little hot and people were calling you Willie Lynch and all that stuff. But
because when I first got here, me and Jennifer Wagner couldn't stand each other. Now we're like brother and sister.
All right.
Is it more fun? I think it's pretty. I mean, obviously, I think we're biased on the podcast, and that's okay, in the sense that there are very few, if anyone, who can articulate his own philosophy better than Mitch Daniels. He's just an incredibly polished speaker, a very deep thinker. So that's A. Is it more fun to cover A, or is it more fun to cover my former boss, Greg Ballard, who is a little more prone to saying things that haven't necessarily been vetted?
It's like, here's the answer to your question. It's like asking your question, which is your favorite child? You love them all equally, but for different reasons. I like Mitch Daniels because Mitch Daniels is, such a polished individual. But that's all the same reason why I like Greg Ballard, because he's not.
Yeah.
But they're genuine as to who they actually are. Unlike, say, the Attorney General who wants to be, the next, Donald Trump or whatever, and so is doing things to kind of be like Donald Trump. Like, you're not Donald Trump. It's like, it's because characters like, because whenever somebody says, I don't want to be the next Barack Obama or the next Donald Trump, like, no, you won't, because you can't. Because Donald Trump and Barack Obama are such unique personalities in American politics that there's not going to be another one of those guys for like 150 years.
They weren't trying to be anybody.
Right. They were just being themselves. Yeah. So here's the thought. Just be your friggin' self.
So we've had Mitch Daniels on the podcast twice. And the second time we discussed his 8 years as governor. First time was more about his earlier career. I said to him on the podcast, I would like your opinion on this, that the two most remarkable political results or performances of my lifetime are Mitch Daniels winning Marion County in 2008 by 50,000 votes when Barack Obama won it by, I think, 125,000 votes. 3 years later, Greg Ballard then wins re-election. Those two results to me are almost unfathomable in some ways. Would you put those two results up there on your list, or do you have another one that you think is even more remarkable?
I would say those two definitely, because it shows, once again, that Republicans can win Marion County if you're not crazy. And you just kind of practice and do good government. Matter of fact, I think that's basically anywhere. Because I'll never forget, during the 2008 campaign, I was going up to my mother-in-law's house, lives out in rural Hamilton County, on like 195th and Cynthia Ann Road, and driving along 32, I saw 2 yard signs: Mitch Daniels and Barack Obama. Yeah.
And when I worked for the mayor, when I used to write his speeches, I would tell him, close your eyes and picture the house with the Obama sign and the Daniels sign, because they care about results and integrity. They don't really care about labels or parties.
No, they just want stuff done.
That's right. And I think, to his great credit, that Greg Ballard focused on the issues, and we can get into RFRA for a minute later, perhaps, until his last year in office when that controversy exploded. But he concentrated on the issues that made people comfortable with him. And I always say, or used to say, that getting voters comfortable with you is the sweetest of the sweet spots.
Because fundamentally, I argue voting is an emotional process. Mm-hmm. It really is. Yes, well, what about issues? But people either vote for who they like, or they vote against who they can't stand. Now, why they like you, they may like you for a number of different reasons. They may like you because of your position on issues. Mm-hmm. They may like you because you're just a heck of a nice guy or a straight talker. But voters vote for fundamentally who they like and against who they can't stand. Yeah. And Mitch Daniels and Greg Ballard are very likable people. Now, get Mitch Daniels in a room, he's going to be like the bull in the china shop. Hey, we're doing this and we're going forward, and damn the torpedoes, but you still love the guy.
Well, and Ballard listened to and watched what Mitch Daniels did, because one of the very first things he did after he became mayor was to tell Michael Huber, find me my toll road deal. And that toll road deal ended up being the sale of the water company, which then had a windfall of more than $400 million to be invested in infrastructure. You're listening to the Leaders and Legends podcast with Abdul-Hakim Shabazz, and we're joined by Chris Spangle. I have a couple more questions, and then Chris, if you want to ask a couple more, and then we'll end with the 5 questions. Blazing Saddles.
The greatest movie ever made. No, God damn it, I said the sheriff is a nipple.
Why does that resonate?
The amount of times I was on in the air saying, "Where are the white women at?" It was totally inappropriate. Why would you let me do that to myself?
Because it's funny.
It is a masterpiece of almost ironic humor. And, I wouldn't let my son watch it till he was out of high school. And then I said, now you can watch it, because now if you repeat anything, then at least I don't have to go see the Archbishop. Why is that movie so funny for you? And how does that help fuel what clearly is a rebellious streak, again, that you have to push the boundaries of political correctness and accepted norms?
I've never been a big fan of political correctness, to be brutally honest with you. Just call a spade and be done with it. Now, this doesn't mean go be disrespectful to people or be mean, but I've just never had you're an old person. You're not chronologically challenged. Right. Come on, let's just call a spade a spade. What I loved about Blazing Saddles, and by the way, I teach a mass media class at the University of Indianapolis in the spring, and the first thing I have my mass media students do is watch the movie Blazing Saddles.
Could you imagine?
Because I tell them, first of all, if you're going to go in the media business, you need to have some thick skin. Yeah. Because this is not for the faint at heart or the timid. So get over yourself right here, right now. And it's funny because I have to write a little short paper about it, and most of them actually like the movie. They think it's hilarious. Some people think the wording is a little bit like, oh my God. But their parents are like, what are you watching? Blazing Saddles? Like, why are you watching Blazing Saddles? My college professor told me that I had to watch it. Like, I like that guy. Right. Because their parents are in our age group and they get it. And that's what I always love about Blazing Saddles. In Blazing Saddles, nothing is sacred. Everybody is fair game. Drop that chink a day's pay for napping on the job. Hey, boys, we almost lost a perfectly good $400 hand cart.
Well, it's something that I've become more aware of, just like black culture and blackness. And, all my co-hosts have been black from starting with you at this point. But like Robert's honorary.
He's an honorary brother.
Yeah.
Oh, because my grandkids are black.
But I don't know that you necessarily claim that. And that has been like the Uncle Tom thing has been used against you over the course of your career. Like, how do you deal with that? What do you think about all that?
It's funny to bring up Uncle Tom because people who call me Uncle Tom have no idea who Uncle Tom really was. And never read the book, Harry Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin, because if you read the book, Uncle Tom was actually the hero.
Right.
Who actually saved people and took the punishment so the slaves could escape. Like, duh. So whenever somebody calls me Uncle Tom, I'm like, hey, thank you. I'm kind of proud of that. Scoring for the good guys. But, I guess my question is, do we have racial issues in this country? Yes, we do. But I think it's because people are just way too uptight. And I kind of blame social media for this, because social media is how the misinformed reach the uninformed, to be brutally honest with you. And my thing with social media has always been is that people will say stuff on social media they would never say to a person sitting across the table from them.
Yeah.
And so I think social media is kind of added to sort of the vitriol. And also people sort of retreat to their own corners and get their own news information that just feeds into what they think is true. And then they never get out of that bubble.
Robert, the amount of times, speaking of Blazing Saddles, that we got phone calls as social media started to take off going, he's black? From the callers. Every week we got one of those.
And actually, one of the first letters I got when I went to work at WXNT Radio one of the first emails was some guy was like, I can't believe they hired somebody named Abdul to be on this radio station. We're at war with you people, and I don't want to listen to no terrorist talk radio. So I emailed him back like, sir, that's a double negative, which means you do want to listen to terrorist talk radio, and I'm happy to oblige you.
You get, because we have to ask a little bit about your recent contretemps with the Attorney General. You get labeled a lot in the local media as a conservative. And I read that label and I just kind of go, well...
It's like calling Robert a conservative.
Yes.
With his Nixon tattoo.
Yes. And that is something that I find interesting. Would you classify yourself as a conservative? I know you voted for Barack Obama. I think, did you vote for him both times? I remember we've had this conversation.
One time.
But first time. But you're pro-choice and you're pro-marijuana legalization. You were pro-LGBT long time ago. Would you consider yourself conservative, or is it just a matter of you're black, you're not Angela Davis, therefore you are conservative?
I would be considered a socially progressive capitalist pig in a nutshell. In other words, I don't care what you do or who you do it with, as long as you're not asking me to pay for it. It's just that simple. In a nutshell, though, I would be considered to be more like a classic liberal. Free markets, free trade, free people. That's my genuine philosophy. I'm not so much libertarian that I don't believe like no roads, no schools, no put a little sticker on your mailbox to get fire service. Meanwhile, if you don't have fire service, the rest of the neighborhood's going to burn down because you don't have fire.
It's not how it works.
It's not how it works.
Continue to slander.
But I'm a split ticket voter. I tend to vote in Republican primaries, but my wife tends to vote in Democratic primaries, so we make sure we got our bases covered. Mm-hmm. This is the first time I've ever said that in public. Mm-hmm. Must be getting ready to do something. And get political aspirations out the way. But no, I'm a split ticket voter. I always have been, always will, because my parents always taught me, son, nobody has a monopoly on good ideas or stupidity.
2022 has been an interesting year for you. It's, I think, almost sui generis when it comes to having a local member of the media be targeted by a statewide elected official. Did you at all see your battle with Attorney General Rokita coming? I know that he's not been a fan of yours for a while.
For a couple years.
Because I worked for Luke Messer in the 2018 Republican Senate primary.
Which is crazy because he used to co-host he guest host the radio show. He and I were friendly because of it.
Yep.
What'd you do?
Well, no, I think it goes back to the U.S. Senate race back in 2018, and I think what the problem was that Messer's people were all from Indiana. It was like you, it was Jennifer Howell, it was Megan. It was people who've been friends of mine for years who I already knew, whereas Rokita didn't really have anybody from Indiana. He had a guy from like West Virginia and some other places, and I just didn't know him. And so they were like, Abdul's in the Messer camp. Like, no, I'm not in the Messer camp. I'm not in anybody's camp. I just know the Messer people pretty well because they're all been friends of mine, for years. It's just that simple. And so when Rokita dropped out of the U.S. Senate debate, hosted by the Debate Commission, saying he didn't want the debate should only be held by conservatives and not liberal college professors, liberal talk show hosts. Like, who the hell is he talking about? He's not talking about. I'm a liberal in the classic sense of the word, but as far as defund the police, no. Public assistance, no. Not school choice, yeah. So that was interesting, and then it just kind of deteriorated from there until I tried to put his news conference. I was banned, and then I had to go get my good buddies at the ACLU to take care of that.
Do you think in some ways that he was looking for not a foil, because that would be disrespectful to you, but someone to basically pick a fight with? I mean, he seems to be, I know him, I can't say that we're close in any way, shape, or form, but he's won more races than he's lost, and that's just a demonstrable fact. Do you get the sense that he's looking for fights, that he goes out of his way, especially with the news media? I mean, I remember having lunch with a couple of reporters. This is in the 2016 primary season. And I basically said, a Republican candidate loses no votes in the primary if he went up on the stage and said, every newspaper headquarters should be burnt down. Every single TV station is against us. They're all liberals. That would not in any way hurt him. And the response I got to that was like, you're kidding me. And I was like, who's leading the Republican primary in 2016? And so it appears that the Attorney General is taking a page out of that playbook, because the Republican primary electorate, which comprises obviously a vast majority here in Indiana, wants that. How much of it do you think is real, and how much do you think is contrived?
I think most of it is contrived. I think Rokita is a smart political creature. If I want to get ahead and do well in Indiana, I need to adopt the Donald Trump playbook as much as humanly possible. Now, I don't think that necessarily works because, frankly, I think he's a dick. Can I say that?
Yes, you can.
Okay. Sorry about that.
No. I'll mark it.
Okay,
But
sweet.
he said he's a dick.
Yeah. Just making sure you heard me. He's a dick.
But Eric Holcomb hasn't adopted that playbook, and he's won twice. I mean, I'm not disputing your thesis,
but he's not popular on Twitter.
I think it's obvious.
See, here's the thing. Here's the thing about Rokita, in my personal opinion. In my personal opinion, Rokita was looking for a fight because he figured, okay, I can go against Abdul, because first of all, his name's Abdul, so let's deal with all that comes along with that. Nothing else more needs to be said. And I don't think he was expecting me to fight back. He figured we'll just ban him from news conferences and that'll be the end of the discussion. But I was like, no, you're not going to do this. I'm going to go get me. I went and got the ACLU on purpose because, number one, those guys they're the best First Amendment lawyers in the country. And number two, Rokita hates the ACLU.
Yeah.
And so to lose against Ken Falk was just icing on the gravy.
So how did your fellow journalists, because you are a journalist and anyone who says you aren't that's just absurd. So how did your fellow journalists react? Did you feel like you had their support? It was maybe 10 years ago or so. Remember the Obama White House wanted to ban the Fox News correspondent or the Fox News from it. Yeah. But CNN and NBC, like all the White House correspondents rallied around. It might even have been James Rosen before they spied on him, of course. But rallied around and said, hey, look, you can't do that. Did you get that same treatment?
I got it very quietly from friends of mine, like send me an email like, hey, Abdul, respect what you're doing. Matter of fact, I got that from not only my journalism friends, but also a lot of Republican lawmakers and Democratic lawmakers and lobbyists in the state house. Because I had a couple folks who endorsed Rokita during the U.S. Senate race, like, Abdul, love what you're doing. Keep it going.
Establishment sticks together.
And what do you think Rokita gained
nothing
from it?
Because in order for, as you, Robert, you understand this better than anybody, in order for the narrative to work, it has to be at the very least somewhat believable. In order for the narrative to have legs and really carry. But nobody thought I was a liberal journalist.
Right.
So your basic premise doesn't work. And I've also been here covering local government and politics for 18 years.
You're a very known quantity.
Yes. And so if one thing, if I was unknown or somebody that didn't know me, I get that. But I'm a known quantity. I've been covering like three governors, my third, fourth governor now, one of the longest serving members of the State House Press Corps. So how does your narrative work when it doesn't work?
You've been generating goodwill and he has not.
Yes.
For a very long time. Then that matters.
That's why I got the cheat sheet.
We've reached the point in the Leaders and Legends podcast where we ask the same 5 questions of all of our guests. Our guest is Abdul-Hakim Shabazz. Would you want to ask the questions, Chris?
Sure. I got a million more questions.
Let me hand over the football to you.
All right. Thank you. I've never been able to do this before. All right, Abdul. Just blatant honesty. Just let's hear it. What was your first job?
My first job was actually working in my uncle's typewriter and sewing machine repair shop. People would bring in typewriters and sewing machines, and I would just fill out the invoice and set them in the corner and go do my homework.
You didn't get your hands dirty? Get in there and take those finely manicured hands? And...
No. No, I did not.
What was your first concert?
It's either Goo Goo Dolls or Savage Garden.
You're not a concert person, are you?
Not really.
Yeah.
Because I like being able to press skip.
That might be the youngest band that we've heard on this podcast.
That's probably so.
Everybody else is,
it was like the Goo Goo Dolls, Savage Garden, like 97, 98.
If you could suggest any book for someone to read, what book would you recommend?
Thomas Friedman's The World is Flat.
Why?
Because it shows how our economy is changing. And it's no longer, in kids in Indiana, a kid in Indianapolis no longer competing with a kid from Brazil, Indiana. You're competing with a kid from Brazil, literally. And you got to have the skills in the 21st century to compete. Because the perfect example I like to use is 100 years ago, when my grandfather worked in a factory, his job was to take those boxes over there and move those boxes over there. 25 years later, my uncle, he's got a forklift. 25 years later, my older cousin's got a crane. 25 years later, my younger cousin is basically sitting in a room with a computer, pushing buttons and moving boxes in warehouses all over the country. And so that's why I say, and this is my opinion on immigration, like it's not illegal immigrants who are taking your jobs, it's automation that's taking your job. So you got to have the skills to deal with the automation. That's why I say Thomas Friedman's The World is Flat.
That was, I believe, Greg Ballard's book as well. He is a big fan of that book.
If you could witness any event in history, be there in person as it happens, which event would you choose?
That's a good question. Any event in history. This is going to sound really weird. I would want to go be there for the last few days of Jesus Christ, just to see the politics behind it. Not so much the story of the crucifixion and the resurrection, but I've always found in religion, people tend to forget the politics of what was going on at the time.
Yeah.
And so they don't have a full perspective of everything. Because my wife, who's very devout Baptist, as I am not, we have these discussions all the time, because Jesus said, love your enemies as you would yourself. Well, the reason he said love your enemies is because the enemies could kill you, because they're Romans with swords and sticks. So you can't beat them, so you may as well like them.
So you want to meet Caiaphas. hang out with the chief priest.
Actually, be Herod, actually.
So you want to party then?
You are the Christ, the great Jesus Christ.
If you want to do politics, don't you want to meet Pontius Pilate?
Yeah.
Hey, what's say? Love like Jesus, but wash your hands like Pilate.
We just watched the Passion of the Christ. Lots of politics in that movie. You should check it out.
I saw that. That was enough for me. I'm more of a Jesus Christ superstar kind of person.
If you could have dinner with anyone living today, 2 hours off the record just to chat, whom would you choose?
Actually, I would choose Donald Trump to ask you, Mr. Trump, what the hell is your goddamn problem? No, seriously, because we know you do things to because you're smart, you're a businessman, and to say you're not a politician, you are, because you don't build buildings in New York City and Chicago without knowing how to play politics. So let's just be honest. All the kidding aside, all the airs aside, let's just figure out who Donald Trump actually really, really is.
What if there isn't something there?
Then there isn't.
If you had to choose one word to describe Donald Trump, which word would you choose?
Histrionic.
Yeah.
Chris?
I think that nailed it. I mean, narcissistic.
That's why I say Trump is a racist. Because to be racist, you actually got to care about what other race people are. Trump's a narcissist.
Yeah,
because I'm one. Because I'm one. He's always at the meetings.
Has social media been good for you?
Oh, it's been great. It's great. It's great for any politics. It's great for me expressing my thoughts. I get up in the morning about 4 o'clock. The first thing I do is I check my Facebook memories to see what I can steal from last year and from.
You didn't. I mean, when you got let go from WXNT, you didn't even miss a beat, did you?
Nope. We started indie politics I got let go on WXNT in August, and we started indie politics on Labor Day.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking about starting something up, like something a little bit different, like, hey, something like Politico, but for Indiana. And so talking to a bunch of people, and then my brother and I, we built the first website. It was like the Wright brothers in their old bicycle shop at Kitty Hawk. It's like, oh my God, this is...
What listeners have to understand is Abdul got a goodbye period. A farewell tour on the radio, which does not happen at any place. You were packing your stuff the day they tell you that you were there. They told you were leaving, and you had weeks.
Well, actually, they told me I was leaving. They told me that Wednesday, and I got to stick around until that Friday because they thought they were worried about I was going to say something. Like, I'm not going to say anything or do anything stupid. But I do remember Mitch Daniels coming by.
Yeah, I was there that morning.
Yep, and Mitch Daniels like, Abdul, like, you're still media as far as we're concerned. You got your press badge? Like, yeah, yes, I do. Like, you're welcome anytime. I was like, by the way, Governor, you'd have made a heck of a president. It's like, an Abdul, you'd have made one hell of a press secretary.
He showed up without his detail, who showed up about 10 minutes later, who was ticked off at the governor because he had ridden his Harley. And he knew my name, which there's no reason he should have remembered me. But I remember him saying at one point, Abdul, there's only two voices my dog knows in the morning. You and me.
Yep.
That's such a Mitch Daniels saying. Whether he stole it or created it, that sounds exactly like him.
I stole it when I met Steve Inskeep from National Public Radio. I was like, Mr. Inskeep, my dog only recognizes two voices in the morning, yours and mine.
What'd he say?
He just kind of laughed. Like, what time do you get up? Like 4:30.
Where do you see yourself? We're going to end the podcast here in a minute. It's been a lot of fun, obviously. I'm a huge fan of yours, professionally and personally. Very gratified at how your recent controversy, if that's the right term, turned out the way that it should have. What do you see yourself doing in 10, 15 years? We're about the same age. I think I'm a few years older than you. Do you see yourself still here in Indianapolis or someplace a little bit larger or where maybe there's the Democrats control the city, the Republicans control the state. There are some states where everything's up in play. Would moving to a place like that?
I tend to like divided government because it keeps life interesting. Because the legislature was not as much fun as it was between 2006 and 2010, when Pat Bauer was Speaker, Mitch Daniels was Governor, and David Long ran the Senate. So you had an interesting sort of dynamic and back and forth. One thing I do have to make a decision, which I'm probably going to make a decision, my wife and I are going to Alaska in June, is whether or not to run for mayor of Indianapolis.
Your dream
As a Republican?
More than likely, yeah. So I got to make that decision. I'll make it when I come back from Alaska.
Would the Democrats let you run as a Democrat?
I can run as whatever I want.
I know. That's the beauty of it. Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to give up a nice life with Mrs. Shabazz, a good media career, teaching? I mean, there's so many things we didn't get to in the last hour.
Because I think what Indianapolis is missing right now is, this is going to sound really weird, is hope. Is that people feel the city's on the wrong path. Crime is out of control, potholes. And I understand there's only so much a mayor can actually do. But the mayor should also be a cheerleader for the city. It should make people feel good about, where you live, where you work, where your kids go to school. And I think the city has lost under Joe Hogshead, who I like Joe personally. I think the city has lost hope. And it really needs that hope restored back, because once people feel good about the place, then a lot of other things tend to fall into place as well. Because when I'm on, say, I-69, because I got to go to Huntington tomorrow to give a Lincoln Day speech, I'd rather see all the cars coming back into the city than going out of the city.
The comments on that Huntington speech post are hilarious, too, by the way. I totally agree. I read Gary Kasparov's book, Winter is Coming, and he talked a lot about Reagan's vision. And I started on Reagan at Reykjavik. The
Ken Edelman book. It's terrific.
Just the moral clarity of Reagan and how the power of hope and the power of actually believing in this stuff. I mean, where do you see the Republicans going? Because they seem to be going down that Rakita path, and that kind of, we're not surprised by it with the talk radio callers that we dealt with for so many years, but they've seemed to have seized that, and cynicism runs wild.
Well, that's why I think, once again, it's social media. It's sort of that you get all your news from one place, because liberals won't watch Fox and conservatives won't watch MSNBC. I say watch all three. That way you get a full picture of what exactly is going on. Now, as far as the evening programs, that's a whole different ball of wax, whether it's Rachel Maddow or Laura Ingraham or Don Lemon. That's not news. That's basically opinion dressed up as news. But I'm talking about the news stuff. I watch all three because it gives me a full view of what's going on. I also read the Wall Street Journal. I read the Atlantic.
But how would you overcome that as a politician? that cynicism, especially within the Republican Party. But
one politician at a time.
Yeah.
It's like how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Yeah.
You have been listening to the Leaders and Legends podcast. It's presented by Veteran Strategies, a local veteran public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Girl Scouts of Central Indiana, Garmon Construction, Leaders and Legends LLC, the Grand Hall and Conference Center at Historic Union Station, the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn, and McAllister Machinery, your friendly neighborhood Caterpillar dealer. Our guest on the podcast has been Abdul-Hakim Shabazz. Love you.
Hey, gentlemen, my pleasure.
It's always great to see you, my friend. Thank you, Chris, for co-hosting. Obviously, you brought a lot to the podcast with your friendship with Abdul, stretching back from the womb, basically.
Yeah, we didn't even get to your adopted son, your teaching career.
He's fine. Teaching's good.
Yeah. Mrs. Shabazz and how
She's great.
we didn't think that it would last this long.
I won the pool.
I know. I met my first wife. We said, "Oh, that'll last." Well, let's see who actually gets married first, and you won.
Thank you very much for listening.
Hey, thanks, Robert. Great, Chris. Appreciate being here.
Thank you very much for listening to Leaders and Legends, brought to you by Veteran Strategies Incorporated. If you want to contact us about this program or our menu of public relations services, please send us an email at robert@veteranstrategies.com. That's robert@veteranstrategies.com.